Looks good. Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I just completed my PhD looking at how PLAR impacts career development. So what I'm going to try to do in the next 16, 17 minutes is share my PhD findings, try to fit 91,000 words, 64 charts, figures, and over 400 pages into the next few minutes. So I'll begin by sharing that I'm privileged to live, work, learn, and play on the lands of the Secwepemcúlecw, and that's in Kamloops, British Columbia. And two values from the Secwepemc people that have guided my research are both the path you choose in life, the way in which you want to live, and everybody come together to help one another. And I think you'll see those values emulated throughout the document, the presentation. So really quick, I'm going to share what my research question was, share some of the highlights from the literature review and the methodology, and then I'm going to slide into the research findings. And I'm only sharing 5 of the findings because there was a few that didn't impact PLAR, but I'm not going to mention those. So I've spent the last many years looking at what variables influence meaningful career development paths for both traditional TRU and post-traditional students. The average age of a PLAR student going through our programming at TRU is 38. So comparing what their career path looked like compared to those who did a more traditional route, went to high school, within the year or two of graduating, came to TRU. And I looked at the sub-questions that related to this are, what are the commonalities and differences in the variables that influence their career pathing? And how did the roles of education, experience, and participating in PLAR influence this? And of course, I cannot leave it without looking at the role of structure and agency. So quite ambitious. If I was to do it again, I think I would have done a simpler project. The literature review itself, there was over 400 sources, and I looked at things like, of course, structure and agency or changing world, PLAR, career development. And in the literature review, over 50 variables emerged, all as in impacting PLAR. And these next 2 images here communicate how I was looking at this. So I didn't want to just look at any one variable. So I didn't, if you look at the ant on the tree, I didn't want to look at the ant, maybe that represents age, or the bird overhead, which represents career development, or the role of luck, or even the specific education. I wanted to look at it more holistically, the interconnection, the intersection, the complexity of it. And that image down on the bottom of the screen with all those circles, that represents the different variables and how do you make sense of it all? And so this image just helps give that perspective. And in the lit review, just to drill down into the topics a little bit more, I looked at global changes, population growth, demographics, the role of technology, how we learn, some of the core elements of PLAR, career development theories, theories on transition, which I'm going to come back to. And the word cloud just emulates how some of these came up in different shapes and forms. And then the seminal authors, some of you are here today that help guide this work. You'll have access to this presentation. You already have access to it, so I'm not going to go through the details there. Another 2 really important images, you might be wondering, how did I take over 50 images or 50 variables and make sense of it all? So what I had to do was I had to look at what are the like-minded areas, and I developed a framework where I could put those variables into 7 different categories. So one category was the student's background factors, so their age, the geographical origin, the parent's education level. Another category, personal attribute factors. There was so much written about these. I had to divide this again further into 4 sub-themes. So we're looking at personal development and identity, career decision-making, commitment and resilience, agency and control, emotional well-being. The 3rd category was social and environmental factors, looking at the changing society, specifically structural changes in the labor market. Who were the key influencers? How were they socialized? What was the importance of social recognition? Over to developmental factors, and that's what program of study did they take? How much education did they get? What other certifications did they have? What experience and knowledge did they have to offer their career? What were their transferable skills, both those soft skills, those people skills? We looked at tacit knowledge and even looked at grade point average, which, spoiler alert, it doesn't impact anything. And then we looked at what do they know about the labor market? What are their career knowledge factors that impacted it? So what do they know about the labor market, different occupations? What's their job search understanding? And then what was the labor market they were graduating into? And this has been, I've been researching this for over 15 years now. And I can say if students have a really good work search strategy, it doesn't matter what labor market they graduate into, they can find work. The sad part is most students don't have a good work search strategy. And lastly, I looked at things like luck and chance, but I put it together into something called kairos, which is a Greek terminology that is having luck, but it's being in the right place at the right time, and really important knowing that you're in the right place at the right time. And shared differently, this is another image that kind of weaves it all together. And what you can see here is our changing world represented by the weather we experience, right down to the roots. I put PLAR right in the center with those rocks there. The trunk of the tree represents career development. The branches represent individuals' career pathing. And life is that canopy. And then you can't forget about the role of agency and structure. So agency is what we can control. It's self-directed. It's that decision-making, whereas structure is the things we don't have a lot of control over. And things like the labor market, employment trends, economic conditions, but more importantly, the structure of our education systems and what knowledge is valued and how we belong in that world. The methodology, I used mixed methods, going with surveys, 3 surveys, and qualitative 38 interviews. The survey started way back when I did my Master's of Education, and I wanted to know why some students transitioned to the labor market really well from the arts program and why some struggled so much. And when you combine the data of the 3 surveys, it's just over almost 1,200 responses. And that gave me some really good information to consider, but it didn't give me, it's almost like a skeleton in the bones, but it didn't give me the meat or the muscles. And that's where the interviews came in. They just provided such more depth of understanding. And with the 38 interviews, I did something really unique called career mapping. And this is a different map than some of you might know. At the beginning of each interview, I asked the participants to draw what their career transition story looked like. And so yeah, 36 maps with that. And I intentionally withheld the color red, asking them to use it after they finished their map to show where luck and happenstance came in, exploring that kairos factor. And I selected 4 maps to share today. This one shares how people represented their career development as a metaphor. And this is probably where I got the idea for the metaphor of trees throughout my research. This one here illustrates where the role of luck came in. So like I shared, the role of luck came in different ways, and this participant drew it in 3 different places. And then we were able to talk about the role of luck in their career development. This one here reflects how feelings and emotions can come through in drawing, which really don't come through in surveys very well. And you can see here, this participant talked about feeling anxious, the self-doubt, limited self-awareness, and motivation prior to PLAR. And then after PLAR, the respect they received, the confidence they had, how it shifted their career understanding and the possibilities. And lastly, this is a really, really busy map, but I'm only going to highlight 2 places. Specifically, when I asked about the role of PLAR, it came up in 2 places. And specifically, it came about career confidence, how it impacted that, self-awareness and understanding. And there's a story from this career map I'm going to share in a bit. For those of you who know me, you won't be surprised at all to know that I blended two research methodologies here, Indigenous research philosophy and critical realism. What I loved about the Indigenous research philosophy was the epistemological understanding of whose knowledge is most valued and creating that room for multiple ways of knowing and multiple ways of knowledge to be shared. And this really added well to that relationality, the storytelling, the lived experience, and recognized the role of community, cultural understandings, and relational learning as legitimate and valuable sources of knowledge production. Whereas critical realism was more around that sense of ontological understanding and our sense of belonging in the society that we live in, and how structure and agency interact and relate over time. These two together, these two worldviews, really offered a strong foundation to do the research with. Almost like I feel like I need to do a drum roll now. This is the 5 relevant findings related to this audience today. And I'll go through each of those with 1, sometimes 2 slides. So the first finding, the positive impact of PLAR on career development. 80% of participants that went through PLAR said that their transition from their degree into meaningful career was successful, compared to only 35%, which is so low of agreement rate with those participants, those traditional students that were younger and went right from high school or shortly after high school into university. Some of the responses that came from the interviews and the survey comments was that PLAR played a significant role in moving my life forward. I would not have the job I have now without PLAR. It helped me get my undergrad, allowing me to write my professional management designation quicker. And I was surprised to hear this, but not in hindsight. Many people that went through the PLAR process felt much more confident in education, and they continued on with their formal education in different ways or shapes. For me, finding number 2, I should have saved this one to the last, is by far the most important. This speaks about the transformational impact on not just their careers, but on their identity in general. And 2 slides here, that whole interaction between reflection and validation is woven into this completely. I think many of us have understood that PLAR impacts professional identity. That process of identifying, reflecting, sharing, and evidencing their learning really helps participants understand themselves in different ways, and they're better able to communicate their skills, their knowledge, and abilities. That validation of what they know, and so much of which has been overlooked or undervalued, and making it more visible really helps with their sense of professional identity. And many participants talked about imposter syndrome and how that shifted to having a sense of an imposter to a more professional legitimacy. And this helped immensely in their career decision-making, how they were navigating their careers, how they understood their career development and what they wanted to do next with it. And of course, you can't have any of that without career action. Their career action was increased. And as I already said, their confidence to pursue further education and career opportunities. So that's all just with the professional identity. And if PLAR did nothing else, it just got them credits and did this, that's amazing in itself. But there was more. It also helped them understand that validation of what they know and how they know it. It shifted them from seeing themselves as accumulating experience to seeing themselves as knowledgeable, capable learners with expertise. That reduction in the self-doubt, the anxiety, the fear, their increased status, to go from that club of not having a degree to having a degree, that sense of social esteem, that came out so loud and clear in both the surveys and the interviews. And I think if I was to sum it up, it's that reshaping of the understanding of themselves and where they belong in the world. And in a Western world, there is a lot of power given to formal education. And so those changes in personal and professional identity were really pronounced. And then that leads to something that we talk about a lot, the transformational impact of PLAR.
Sorry, Susan, just 5 more minutes, okay?
Thank you. Yeah. So this transformational impact of PLAR, some people described it as a metamorphism, like this butterfly representation, or as recursive, meaning that what they learned and how they learned it kept coming back, that understanding of what they'd done and how they'd gotten there. And I think this quote at the bottom is just crucial. PLAR didn't simply validate the learning, it validated the learner. And that simple structure and wording is really impactful. The next few findings, I'll go a little quicker on because they're not as exciting. I've already mentioned this, the labor market understanding, their work search strategies, and how they go through that transition of being a student to becoming a careerist was also impacted by going through PLAR. As I mentioned, their awareness, their employment opportunities were all improved. Of note, I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. They were more likely to use targeted and relational-based approaches to work search instead of the more passive, I'm going to apply for 1,000 jobs and see what it gets me. And there's an anthropological theory that whenever we go through change, there's 6 patterns we go through. Change from being pregnant to being a mom, from being a student to being a careerist. These changes are temporary, obligatory, tightly scripted, carefully and expertly guided, predetermined, and progressive. This research showed we're going through substantial changes in these norms, and these norms are no longer applicable. Non-PLAR students really struggled with this. PLAR students that didn't challenge them at all. They sailed through it because they didn't need that tightly scripting. They didn't need that guidance. They didn't need it to be predetermined or progressive.
Sorry, Susan, did you mean to stop sharing?
Oh, am I not sharing anymore?
Right, yeah, you just went down to you.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing completely then, and you can just see me again.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to verbalize findings number 4. PLAR impacts. There is a cost to this, and the cost is that when we ask students to take all of this learning they have, all of this discursive bits and pieces of learning, think of it as Lego blocks. We ask them to gather it all together, to think about it, and to share it with us. As they gather up all of those Lego pieces, we then ask them to put it into a shape that we can understand. The shape that we understand, we tell them what to build it back up into. We tell them we need to assess it for this. And the cost of this is their ontological security. We give them credit and value for what they know in our structure. And what that does is it reinforces the existing cultural and power structures and reshapes learning that is rich in formal and non-formal and takes it to a place that's very Western. And in that, we're refining what they know and how they know it. So that's a really important consideration. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about the recursive, relational, complex, and adaptive system of what career development is. And the research really emulated, when you think back to the 7 themes that I put together for what constitutes, how those 50 variables interact with each other, putting them into 7 categories helped me understand the lit review. But in the end, it all comes back to it's an adaptive system. All those variables have impact, some a little bit more than other. But at the end, any one variable can impact things directly through. So one student I talked to, he had a son in his last year of high school and raised his son on his own. That really impacted his career development. A PLAR candidate that was diagnosed later in life with severe mental health challenges, that impacted her career development. So together they all have a role to play. Personal attribute factors rise to the surface, but together all of them work in a relational way. And yeah. So 2 final thoughts. I'm going to go back to that quote that I shared. PLAR does not simply validate the learning, it validates the learner, and that has significant transformational impact. And the second one I want to leave you with is that PLAR is much more than a mechanism for awarding credit. It impacts their professional identity, their personal identity, and for many, it is transformational. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome work, Susan. Unfortunately, no time for questions. We're going to have to just